There is a sound you have not heard in decades. The clink of glass bottles on a doorstep before the sun comes up. The low hum of an electric milk float rolling down your street at 5:30 in the morning. You heard it every day of your childhood and never once thought to appreciate it. You just assumed it would always be there. The same way you assumed the whole street would smell of bonfires every November. The same way you assumed your mum would always be at the stove on a Sunday afternoon with the windows steamed up and the smell of roast beef filling every room. None of it lasted, but all of it shaped you. Today we are counting down 7 memories that only make sense if you grew up in 70s Britain. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, we make videos for people who remember when life was slower and better. Hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us where you grew up. We read every single one. Before we get started, let me say this. If you think number 7 hits you right in the chest, just wait until we reach number 2. That one is going to stop you in your tracks. Let's get into it. Number 7. Top of the Pops. On a Thursday night. It was 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and in living rooms across Britain, the same thing was happening. Families were settling in, the telly was warming up, and the opening bars of Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin came blasting through the speakers as that iconic title sequence lit up the screen. Top of the Pops was on, and for the next 45 minutes, nothing else mattered. In the 1970s, the show was pulling in up to 19 million viewers a week. If you missed it, you missed it. There was no catch-up, no recording it for later. You spent the next day at school completely lost while everyone else talked about what Bowie did or what Slade wore or whether Pan's people had outdone themselves again. You sat on the carpet watching Noel Edmonds or Dave Lee Travis introduce the acts. T-Rex doing Metal Guru, The Sweet doing Ballroom Blitz, Mud doing Tiger Feet in those ridiculous jumpsuits. Then in 1977 the punks arrived and your dad nearly put his foot through the screen when the Buzzcocks turned up. Today there are over 100 million songs on Spotify, but none of them will ever feel the way number 1 felt when you heard it on Top of the Pops for the first time on a Thursday night in 1974. As much as Thursday nights belonged to the telly, there was another part of the 70s that started long before you were even awake. Number 6. The Milkman and the Morning Doorstep. Before your alarm went off, before the kettle boiled or the radio crackled to life, there was the milkman. You heard him before you saw him. The quiet whir of the electric float, the rattle of bottles in their metal crate, the soft clink of full bottles being placed on the step and empty ones taken away. It was the heartbeat of the British morning, and in the 70s it happened on virtually every street in the country. In 1970, over 99% of milk in Britain was delivered directly to the home. Almost every household in the nation had fresh milk on their doorstep before dawn. The milkman was not just a delivery driver. He was part of the fabric of your street. He knew your family. He knew how many pints you needed. He knew when you were on holiday because your mum left a note in the empty bottle. Those bottles were something special. Thick glass with a foil top, silver for full cream, red striped for sterilized, gold for Channel Islands. You peeled the top off and there was a plug of thick cream at the neck. In winter, the milk froze and the cream pushed the top right up like a little ice cream column. In summer, the blue tits got their first pecking holes through the foil before you even opened the front door. On Saturdays, your mum settled up. He stood on the doorstep with his leather pouch of coins and she counted out the money. It was personal. It was dependable. By 2014, only 4% of British milk was delivered to the door. The floats disappeared, the bottles disappeared, but on a quiet morning you swear you can still hear the clink of glass somewhere just beyond memory. Speaking of things that happened after dark, the 70s had a habit of turning ordinary evenings into something magical. Sometimes all it took was the lights going out. Number 5. Power cuts and candlelit evenings. Sometime between 1971 and 1974, the lights went out across Britain. Not because of a storm, because the country was running out of electricity. Coal miners went on strike. The government introduced the 3-day working week. and in homes from Glasgow to Guildford families sat in the dark. But here is the thing. If you were a child, it was absolutely brilliant. The candles came out. Mum found that big box of household candles from under the kitchen sink, and the whole house looked like something from a Dickens novel. Shadows danced on the walls. Dad dug out the camping lantern, and instead of sitting in separate rooms, the entire family ended up together, talking, playing cards, telling stories. There was something thrilling about it if you were 7 years old. School was cancelled sometimes, the streets went dark, you walked to the corner shop and it was lit by paraffin lamps like something from the war. Old Mrs. Patterson, 2 doors down, brought round a flask of tea because she had a gas stove and wanted to check your mum was all right. The neighbours actually looked after each other, not because someone organised it, because that is what people did. The 3-day week ended in March 1974. Edward Heath lost the general election partly because of it. Yet ask anyone who lived through those candlelit evenings as a child, and most of them will smile. Because the thing that was supposed to be a crisis turned out to be something that felt a lot like family. Now, if the power cuts taught us that the dark could be magical, there was one night of the year when the whole country agreed on that. And the 70s did it better than any decade before or since. Number 4. Bonfire night the way it used to be. You started building the bonfire weeks in advance. Every kid on the street had the same job. Find wood, drag it to the bomb site or the wasteland at the end of the road and pile it as high as you could. Old doors, fence panels, broken furniture, bits of pallets from behind the shops. The bigger the pile, the more respect your street earned. Then there was the guy. You stuffed your dad's old trousers and a jumper with newspaper, gave him a mask or painted a face on a pillowcase, sat him in a pushchair and park yourself outside the supermarket. Penny for the guy, mister. And people actually gave you money. Real coins from total strangers who smiled and remembered doing exactly the same thing when they were your age. On the 5th of November, the bonfire was lit, and the whole neighborhood came out. Sparklers in every hand, Catherine wheels nailed to the fence, Roman candles, bangers that your older brother threw into puddles, jacket potatoes in foil pulled from the edge of the fire, black on the outside and scalding in the middle, parkin cake sticky with treacle, tomato soup from a flask that burned your lip on the first sip. There were no safety barriers, no risk assessments, no high visibility marshals. Just a massive fire in the middle of the estate and 100 people standing around it with their faces glowing orange and their backs freezing cold. The smell of wood smoke and gunpowder lingered in your coat for days, no matter how many times your mum washed it. Today, around 10 million people still attend organised bonfire events across the UK each year. But most of them are behind a rope line watching a professionally managed display. It is safe and sensible, but it is not the same. Now, bonfires were a nighttime memory. The 70s had something just as powerful that belonged to the mornings. And if you were a child between 1976 and 1982, you know exactly what I mean. Number 3. Saturday morning television. You woke up before your parents. The house was silent. You crept downstairs in your pajamas, turned the telly on, and waited for the picture to appear, because in those days it took a few seconds. And then it arrived. The greatest invention in the history of British childhood, Saturday morning telly. On the BBC, it was multicoloured swap shop hosted by Noel Edmonds with Keith Chegwin doing outside broadcasts in the freezing cold and John Craven reading the news. The show ran nearly 3 hours, completely live. Kids phoned in to swap their toys, pop stars performed in the studio, and there was Posh Paws, the stuffed dinosaur sitting on the desk like the most important guest on television. Over on ITV, it was Tiswas, and that was a different beast entirely. Chris Tarrant and Sally James presided over pure anarchy, custard pies in the face, buckets of water thrown at guests. The phantom flanflinger lurking behind the set. Lenny Henry before he was famous doing impressions that made you fall off the sofa. It was loud and messy and gloriously unhinged. At its peak, Swap Shop pulled in over 10 million viewers on a Saturday morning. Try getting 10 million people to watch anything at 9 o'clock on a Saturday in 2026. You could not do it with a free car and a celebrity hostage. But here is what really mattered. Every kid in your class on Monday morning had watched the same thing. You all knew what Cheggers had done. You all had opinions about whether Swap Shop was better than Tiswas, and you defended your position like it was a matter of national importance. 3 channels, 1 conversation, the whole country tuned in together. Saturday mornings were sacred, but there was one day of the week that was even more sacred. And if you think power cuts brought families together, wait until you hear about number 2. Number 2, the Sunday ritual. This is the one that gets people. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was always there, every single week. Sunday in the 1970s was not just a day. It was a ritual that held the entire country in place. It started with the smell. Roast beef or lamb going into the oven before you came downstairs. Your mum had been up since 8 peeling potatoes and getting the Yorkshire puddings ready. The kitchen windows were steamed up. The radio was on. The house smelled like heaven. Everything was closed. And when I say everything, I mean everything. No shops, no supermarkets, no garden centres, no retail parks. The Sunday Trading Act of 1994 eventually changed all that, but in the 70s, Sunday was untouchable. It belonged to families. The roast went on the table at 1 o'clock sharp. Dad carved the joint. Mum served the veg. Gravy came in a boat, and you were not allowed to start until everyone was sitting down. There were Brussels sprouts that nobody wanted, and roast potatoes that everybody fought over. If there was pudding, it was something with custard. Always custard. After dinner, Dad fell asleep in his chair with the Sunday paper over his face. You were bored out of your mind, but looking back now, that boredom was a kind of peace. Nothing was demanded of you. No screen pulling at your attention. Just the quiet hum of a Sunday afternoon with the people who mattered most doing absolutely nothing together. Fewer than 1 in 4 British families now sit down for a regular Sunday roast together. In the 70s, it was closer to 9 in 10. The table is still there in most houses, but the ritual has gone. And something important went with it. Now, every memory on this list means something. The music, the milk bottles, the candles and the bonfires and the Saturday mornings in your pajamas. But number 1 is different. It is not about a thing you did or a program you watched. It is about a sound. And once you hear it again, you will understand why it matters more than anything else on this list. Number 1, the sound of children on every street. Close your eyes for a moment. Not to what is there now. Listen to what used to be there. The sound of children playing outside your house, shouting, laughing, arguing about whose turn it was. That sound was the soundtrack of every evening and every school holiday in 70s Britain, and it has almost completely disappeared. In the 1970s, playing out was not a treat. It was the default. You came home from school, dropped your bag, and went outside. Nobody planned it. Nobody supervised it. Nobody arranged a playdate 3 weeks in advance. You walked out your front door and the world was waiting. The street was the arena. Kirby, 40-40, British Bulldogs, Knockdown Ginger, Tin Can Alley. You played until the streetlights came on, and then you played a bit longer until your mum shouted your name from the back door. 1 shout meant, "Come soon." 2 shouts meant to come now. 3 shouts meant trouble. Kids moved in packs. Age groups mixed freely. The older ones looked out for the younger ones. Disputes were settled on the spot, usually loudly but always resolved by tea time. There were grazed knees and torn trousers and the occasional broken window. But there was also freedom. Real freedom. The kind you cannot buy and cannot replace with a screen. 71% of British adults remember playing out independently as children. Only 21% of their own children did the same. The streets are still there. The lampposts and the curbs are still there, but the children are gone, tucked away indoors, connected to everything except the kid who lives 3 doors down. The 70s were not perfect. The wallpaper was hideous. The food was questionable. The cars broke down every other Tuesday. But the things that mattered, family, community, freedom, the simple pleasure of being young and outside and alive in a world that had not yet learned to be afraid of itself, Those things were everywhere. You did not have to look for them. You just had to open your front door. If any of these memories took you back, tell us in the comments which one hit the hardest. Share this video with someone who grew up on the same streets you did, and if you have not already subscribed so you do not miss the next one, we remember together.